how every day of my life starts, just so you know. All right, good morning, everybody. Is everybody having a nice weekend? Me too. And listen, if you've read any of the left-leaning media today, you'll know that dozens and dozens of people showed up this weekend. There were at least like 14. It was amazing. Good morning. All right, so I want to let you all know a couple of things. Actually, Tommy, can I talk to you? So here's the situation. There was this gentleman wandering around in the lobby, and he looked at me. He was like a homeless person. He was like, "Can I get up and speak?" And I was like, "Sure." Just kidding. Dinesh DSouza's here. Yeah! So what I was going to say is that over the summer, I think in July or August, I spoke to Dinesh DSouza for the very first time because the Walkaway campaign was blowing up. One of us reached out to the other, and I think there was a mutual admiration. I love Dinesh DSouza. He's expressed great support and admiration for the Walkaway campaign. And over the summer, he released what I believe is his fourth movie, Death of a Nation, which is incredible. All of Dinesh's movies are incredible. And I think Dinesh has been a key player and will continue to be a key player in red pilling people across the nation for years to come. I have enjoyed meeting all of you so much this weekend, and the weekend is not over. I've loved talking with you. I've loved taking pictures with you. It's been amazing, and we can continue to do that throughout the day. Yes. I love you too. But I am going to ask you all for a favor right now. Dinesh has done us an enormous favor by coming here today and speaking. We are so grateful. But part of this enormous favor that he's done for us is this man is so busy. He's on such a tight schedule, and the moment he gets done speaking, he has to get on a plane and go somewhere else to do another engagement. I know, but please respect the fact that his schedule is very tight today. After he speaks, he really does have to leave. I'm so sorry. So if you like pictures of Dinesh, please take pictures while he's speaking, and just enjoy this wonderful, amazing man, and his wife, Debbie. For anyone who's not seen Death of a Nation, you should absolutely watch it as soon as you go home. It's amazing. You'll see Debbie singing. She's a gorgeous, amazing, beautiful singer. Yes. So check out Death of a Nation after you get home. It's amazing. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dinesh DSouza.
You guys against their home country and making a conscious decision to move to this country. And why would we do that if we didn't think that this country was better? And for me, the promise of America has been far more than the promise of opportunity or success. It does offer that. In fact, I've got an acquaintance in Bombay, India, who's been trying to emigrate to the United States, well, for a decade now, and the poor guy hasn't been able to get a visa. And finally I said to him, I said, gee, why are you so eager to come to America? He goes, Dinesh, I really want to move to a country where the poor people are fat. So, yes, this is a country of abundance, but this is also a country where we get to write the script of our own life. This is a country where we are the architects of our own destiny, in the driver's seat of our own future. And this is the American dream. I mean, think about it. No other country really has a dream. The Chinese don't have a dream. If the French have a dream, we don't want to know about it. And this dream is in peril today. What are you walking away from? You're walking away from the party of the plantation. The plantation. And here's a word about the plantation. The plantation has never ceased to define the organizing principle of the Democratic Party. This is actually a fact that is suppressed by progressive historiography. Most of what we see in our textbooks, most of what we see on the History Channel, Wikipedia, this is progressive history. History that is spun in such a way that it camouflages all the facts that are inconvenient to progressives. And a lot of my work is aimed not so much as fake news, but fake scholarship, fake history, demolishing these bogus narratives. And so let me lay out briefly this story of the plantation, because it's by now quite widely known that the Democratic Party was the party of the old slave plantation. The Democrats were the champions of slavery, both in the North and in the South. And in fact, the reason for these raids on Confederate monuments is it's an effort to conceal that fact. It's an effort to take the crimes of the Democratic Party and foist them entirely on the South. But when Abraham Lincoln listed the 4 horsemen of slavery, the 4 bad guys of slavery, he named Roger Taney, who is the author of the Dred Scott decision, a Southerner from Maryland. But the other 3 guys that he named were Northern Democrats. Franklin Pierce, the former president from New Hampshire, James Buchanan, the sitting president from Pennsylvania, and Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's supreme antagonist from Illinois. So Lincoln's point was that the Northern Democrats were in bed with the Southern Democrats. Lincoln called them the fire in the rear. And he told Senator Sumner that they were more dangerous to him than the Confederacy. So the Democratic Party did this. It championed the plantation. But the important thing is that when slavery ended, the plantation didn't go away. The reason it didn't go away is because of the genius, if you can call it genius, of one man. And that was the successor to Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, the leader of the New York Democrats. So Martin Van Buren went south, and he saw the slave plantation. And he saw the political power that the Democrats had mobilized by bringing the planter class together. And Van Buren said, this is genius. Now how do I take this up north? Now obviously in the north, at the time, we're talking about now the middle of the 19th realized that he didn't have slaves, but he did have immigrants. Because immigrants were pouring into the United States, disgorged by a lot of turmoil and famine and disaster in Europe, the Irish potato famines and so on. And so here come the Irish and the Italians and the Jews, and they are poor, they are helpless, they are dependent, they're looking for security, many of them don't speak the language. And so Van Buren came up with a brilliant scheme. It was a scheme lifted from the old slave plantation. And here's what I mean. The old slave plantation was based on a very simple rip-off scheme. One guy does the work, the slave, and the other guy steals the fruit of his labor, the planter. And that's why Lincoln defines slavery like this: you work, I eat. So for Lincoln, the core of slavery is theft. And Van Buren realized that he couldn't take that system where A rips off B in a simple way to the north. He needed to modify it. And so he modified it in this way. A makes a deal with B to rip off C. So the Democratic bosses would go to the immigrants who were destitute and helpless and say, listen, we got a deal for you. And in fact, this deal will cost you absolutely nothing. Only your vote. If you vote for us, that will put us in power. Once we get in power, we will loot the treasury. Once we loot the treasury, this part was downplayed, we'll keep most of it for ourselves, but we'll give some crumbs to you. You'll get a flask of whiskey, or you'll get a reference for a job or a temporary apartment. And so the immigrants were recruited as unwitting conspirators in a scheme to rip off C, which is of course the taxpayer, who knows nothing about the scheme at all. And this is really important because this part of the Democratic Party's organizing principle has lasted to the present. So the Democrats don't have a slave plantation now, but they do have ethnic plantations. And they are organized around ethnic lines. Notice that when it comes to blacks or Hispanics, the Democrats don't want to compete for their votes individually. They don't want to convince each guy, this is why you got to vote for me. They want to organize these groups ethnically and create dependency. And today, of course, we have black ghettos, but we have Latino barrios, we have Native American reservations. And what I find really interesting is that all the features of the old slave plantation are still with us today. The historian Kenneth Stamp, in his great work called The Peculiar Institution, he says these are the 5 features of the slave plantation. 1, dilapidated housing, called slave quarters. 2, broken families. In no slave state, a slave marriage is legal. You can sell off the kids, so the families are in disarray. 3, a high degree of violence needed to hold the place together. Slavery is based on force. You need overseers, you need whips, you need fences, you need dogs. That's the violence. 4, no one gets ahead. No proper schooling, no advancement. You end up in life just where you started. And 5, a pervasive atmosphere of nihilism and despair. Well, this is what you find now, not just in Oakland or Detroit. You see it in the barrios of South Texas, where Debbie grew up. You see it in Los Angeles. You see it on the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation in South Dakota. This is the full creation of the Democratic Party, which rules like a one-party state in these places, and they never change. They never improve. And the reason that they never improve is because the Democrats want this dependency. It sustains their political hegemony, domination over the plantation. Now, whenever you lay this stuff out, someone is bound to jump up and down and say, but wait a minute, didn't the 2 parties switch sides? Isn't it true that Abraham Lincoln was a liberal? Isn't it true that there was this great shift of the 2 parties? And I want to test this thesis by looking for a moment at Lincoln himself, and looking at Lincoln's way of distinguishing the 2 parties to see if that way is still correct today. So as I mentioned Party, according to Lincoln, stands for this, quote, "The hand that makes the corn has the right to put the corn into its own mouth." So in other words, people have the right to keep the fruit of their labor. And what's incredible is that even though the parties do change over time and the issues change, we can fast forward 150 years from Lincoln, and the idea that people get to keep their earnings and keep their stuff, that's still the credo of the Republican Party today. That's what Trump is fighting for. And, in a strange way, the concept of you work, I eat, in other words, the concept that one guy puts in the effort and somebody else appropriates the product of it and disposes as they wish, that's still the credo of the Democratic Party today. That's what they stand for now. Now, I think the reason our political fight is so crazy is because this is not a straight fight between us against them. It's not Republicans versus Democrats. If it was just Republicans versus Democrats, all we would have to do is take out our political fly swatter, and that would be the end of it. The Democrats have very powerful allies in academia and the media and Hollywood.
Yep.
And the power of the media is ultimately the power to humiliate. The reason that Republican politicians have been terrified for years is they know that the media has the power to destroy you, to disgrace you, to humiliate you to such a point that your own side will bury you. So the left has the Democratic Party, they've got the media, they've got Hollywood, but I gotta say, thank God, we have Trump. And what this guy is doing is really what Lincoln had to do in 1860, which is stiffen the spine of the Republican Party. And he's done it. He's doing it. I mean, the interesting thing here is not to watch Ted Cruz, but to watch people like Susan Collins or Mitch McConnell. And then Lindsey Graham. Reagan, I'm a creature of the Reagan Revolution. You might say that W and I were sort of Reagan walkaways. But Reagan was a man of priorities. He typically would say, all right, you can't change the world in 30 ways, you can change the world in maybe 2 ways. Let's focus on the Soviet Empire, let's focus on stagflation. And that's about it. The rest of it, you kind of have to let it go. What I find remarkable about Trump, this dude fights on every front. So he's doing the Pacific Trade Pact, and he's nicking away at Obamacare, and he's pushing in tax reform, and he's fixing the court. But what's cool is that while he's doing all this, he finds time to swat Meryl Streep. Saturday Night Live, failing CNN. Debbie and I were at the Texas rally last week, and right in front was a big platform with a sea of media faces. Now, Reagan, of course, had this kind of deft ability to go above the heads of the media. But what I think is cool is that Trump is sort of a one-man tank that rides into the media. And attacks them over. Now, I know there are a lot of people, and there are not a few Republicans, who say say that Trump is a man of deep human flaws. And I would like to address this topic head on. I think it is remarkable that, well, first of all, the context for this discussion is the fact that the Republicans have tried now for decades to appoint the squeakiest of clean Boy Scouts, Dole, McCain, Romney. I mean, Romney is so squeaky clean, if I was writing his college recommendation, it would be something like, you know, not since Jesus Christ. And yet, when Romney climbed up the podium and put himself in the public arena, the left jumped into the arena